This is part 3 of the Tommy Allsup interview in his own words.
Oh, they were all 300 to 400 miles. It's like going from from down in England up into Scotland, every night. We'd be over on the west side of Iowa one night, and then the next night we'd be back in Milwaukee or back in Wisconsin. Then the next night we'd be back over in Iowa, 50 or 60 miles from where we was 2 nights before. They didn't have nothing coordinated. It was just, you can look on a map. There's a guy got a book out, and there's a map in there that shows how it zigzag back and forth, and it's kind of ridiculous, just why didn't they just line them up? But that's the way they booked them back in them days, It does, yeah. It was pretty weird. We didn't care. Was young, and I was 26 years old, and I was the oldest guy on the tour, so everybody else, it didn't bother them, It was all good. Dion and his guys, they did great, and Richie was exceptional little showman. I mean, Richie was really good and played good. He played good guitar, and we'd sit around and I'd show him licks, and he was very interested in learning more. And everybody in the Big Bopper, we got to be good buddies because we'd go out and drink beer at night, and so it was good. Everybody on the tour was good. Well, back then there wasn't very many motels. They were just like, and the hotels were like 1- and 2-story buildings in these little towns, and they were about like what you wouldn't stay in now, and that was it for the motel scene. There wasn't that many people traveling, I guess, in those days, Very few motels. That was before Holiday Inns and Ramada Inns, We talked a lot. We talked every day on the bus, we'd ride and excuse me, I had to get a drink of water. We'd talk about what we was going to do when that tour was over, and he wanted to go back to Lubbock and build a studio and have a publishing company and a production company, and had the whole thing. He'd already made a deal with Coil Records for a production agreement, so anybody that he heard and wanted to produce, well, they said they'd back it, So everything was looking really good, No, there never was. People, their stories have come out, but he may have told me one time that he missed J.R. and Joe B, but we never dwelled on it, never talked about it. He was going his way, and he figured they were going their way. They picked the road they wanted to go, and he wasn't going to stand in their way, So. No, he wasn't even worried about using the name Crickets. He was more concerned about his future, and I knew I wanted to either just be his road manager and help him try to find talent to promote, and I wasn't looking as far. I was looking more into the recording end of it myself. I'd kind of, he kind of had me lined up to go back and kind of run the studio, and his dad and brothers was going to run the music store, and he had things, and then I don't know what kind of band he would have had. He was already changing his style of recording. He was worried about, about his career. It wasn't as big as it was. And I think that's why he was wanting to change, and get away from the sound he started with, I think he felt like it was time to step up, and do something different. And that's what he did when he went in with the violins. He was trying something different. And boy, those were good records. If you listen close to them, man, they're just perfect records. And I think he was just trying to further his career. No, back then you had one microphone up in front of the band. That was it. Sometimes some ballrooms up north would have maybe two mics, and a speaker hung on each side of the stage. There wasn't any monitors. They wasn't micing anything. We turned our amps wide open and played as loud as we could so we could hear them because the kids screaming, so loud. Yeah, we all had Fender Bassmans, yeah. And we had them wide open, man, and Carl was busting heads every night, Yeah, it was wasn't no micing anything back then. And if you was lucky and had a crowd that wasn't really rowdy, then it sounded halfway decent. If you had a crowd that was really getting into it, screaming and clapping their hands, and you couldn't hear nothing. You could stand right on top of your amp and barely hear it, Oh yeah, they were crazy about him. I mean, they loved him. Everybody loved him. He was the man of the tour. You know, they can talk about the other guys, but Holly's the one they come to see. You know, Duluth, Minnesota was a good gig. At that armory, we had several thousand kids there, and it was one of them big old armories where they couldn't get louder than the band because you were up about 6 feet on a tall stage, and the old buildings had lots of echo in them, and the music was twice as loud normally as it ever would be. And that was a good place, and but that was the night we had the bad bus breakdown, and Carl's feet froze. Green Bay was a good job. The Riverside Ballroom, we played that without Carl, but we had another drummer there from another band that sat in with us. But no, they would pay Buddy at the end of the week, and he'd pay us, and it was all cash, you know. So yeah, I gave him the gun. I gave him the pistol in the summer of '58 when we were on that tour up north, and we were checking up every night, and he was carrying a briefcase full of. Back then, you gotta remember, you didn't have a lot of $100 bills. You had people was paying $1.50 to get in, so you was getting a lot of ones, and you was getting a lot of 50-cent pieces, you know. So when you settled up at night, if you had $1,500 coming, you probably had 1,000 ones, and the rest of them would be in fives and maybe some tens, you know. And then you'd have a lot of change. So you'd have a briefcase full of money. And so he said something about it. I had a little pistol, a little .22 pistol. I said, well, keep this in your glove box, you know, because we did literally have briefcases full of money back in them days, and that's all it amounted to, you know. I never heard a word about it, not one word was ever said to me about that, and it's kind of odd because the Big Bopper every day was talking about his baby that was fixing to be born, but I never heard Buddy never mentioned it one time. And I stayed in his apartment 4 or 5 days with him for the tour, and there was nothing mentioned there about it either. I think it was something that came out for the movie, you know, I don't know. Well, I helped him on That Makes It Tough. There was a little minor chord little thing in there that I played for him, but he had the others already recorded, you know. And he had That Makes It Tough, a version of it, and he said, I'd like to put this little minor, how would you do that? Dun, dun, dun. It goes up from A up to a B minor to a D or something, whatever it is right there. And I was showing him the easy way to do that. But that's the only one that, and he had it completed, actually. They were all finished. All those songs were done.
This concludes part 3 of the Tommy Allsup interview. Part 4 is available next.